Hi guys, so in this video I just want to talk about my audio video setup. I get asked about it quite a bit in work meetings. What camera am I using, for example? And it's a kind of a complex answer, so I'm just going to talk about it for 10 minutes or so in this video. The most expensive item in the setup is the camera, and that is the Panasonic GH5S. It's about $2,000, give or take. It's a couple years old now. What makes it special for me is it's a low light focused camera. It does really well in low light. Sony has the A7S series, which is also a low light camera. But the Panasonic GH5S to me is an affordable option that has all the features I want for video. And so that is my choice there. It has a full HDMI out port. So if you have a micro or mini HDMI out, they can come loose. You can get unstable video signals. So this is full HDMI. It has a mic in and a line in port. Line in is very important. We'll get to that in a bit, but that allows us to synchronize our audio with the camera very easily. It doesn't have image stabilization, but we don't need that. It doesn't have good object tracking, but we don't need that either. So this is a great 4K Micro Four Thirds mirrorless camera. Pretty much perfect for this application. It doesn't overheat and it just works. I've left it on for weeks on end without any problems, and I've had it for over a year so far without any problems either. As with any camera, you need to have a lens. And so in this case, I'm using my Olympus 25mm f1.8 aperture, f1.8 aperture lens. This is a autofocus prime lens. It's pretty fast. F1.8 is pretty fast. And 25 and 35mm equivalent would be 50mm. So this is a 50mm equivalent lens. And that gives us a good close-up of sorts at around 6-7 feet away from my face. And so that's generally where I have the camera now. But 6-7 feet away from my face, and it's just slightly above eye level. I don't want it too high because then it'll look small. If I have it too low pointing up, I kind of have them looking up my nose. And so I find that just a little bit above my eye level is the most attractive positioning for this camera. That might be personal taste though. What else I have? The camera itself doesn't come with any sort of external battery. So you need to buy a AC to DC dummy battery. And this plugs in where the battery is, and you can have a DC powered outlet, either battery powered or you can plug it into the wall. So that was like $40, not too expensive, but this allows you to run the camera continuously without needing to replace batteries every 40 minutes. There's also a tripod. I recommend something that's a little bit sturdy. When you trip over the camera eventually, you don't want everything to fall apart. So you want something that will kind of, stay still, stay in the position despite being tugged on every now and then. And that would be kind of the main focus of the setup, is the camera with the lens and all that equipment. But that alone is not good enough. Audio is important. And so for that, I'm using a dynamic microphone. There's condenser microphones, there's dynamic microphones, and there's other types of cheaper ones and off-brand, whatever. A dynamic microphone is nice because it tends to reject the room noise quite well. So that's one of the reasons why I like it. It also allows me to usually get pretty close to the microphone. It allows me to buy a microphone that sounds good for pretty cheap. And it tends to let me use a preamp of my choosing. All that aside, a dynamic microphone can be had for $40 on Amazon. That's quite capable. But the one I picked because, I bought a dozen microphones, and this one was the one that I thought sounded the best. Is this guy here? You can't see it, but is the Shure SM7B dynamic microphone. It's like $300-400, and it's very popular already on YouTube. But you notice that I have it pretty close to my mouth. I do have it out of sight of the camera, though. That's personal preference. I could be on the microphone, but I prefer to be, about 7 inches away in this case from the microphone. And by cropping my face with the camera, I'm able to put the microphone just out of sight. Closer the better, really, with these types of microphones. You'll reject more room noise. You'll sound more intimate and more personal. And so that's kind of my personal opinion. You generally want to be close. If you don't have good mic technique, you can push it back a little bit, but you really do want to work with the camera and work with the microphone to get things as close as you can. The microphone is on a floor stand with an arm, and that arm is counterweighted, so it can extend out quite a bit. And that allows me to put the stand really quite far away from where I'm working and have the arm extend to me, and I can move it around without it getting in my way. I could get an arm that mounts to my desk, but I find if the desk shakes, the mic shakes. It's also kind of always in my way. Desk real estate is important. It's hard for me to move the mic, for example, if it's mounted to my desk. So a stand with a long arm that's counterweighted is my personal preference there. And you can weight the mic. You can weight the stand a few different ways. I actually modified a stand so it was counterweighted, and it works quite well for me. You need to buy an XLR cable for one of these types of microphones, like the Shure SM7. And so I bought a XLR cable. It's 10 feet long. It's Mogami Studio Gold. Quite expensive. But really, you can buy any sort of heavy, like 16 gauge, I guess, professional style XLR cable, 10 feet long. It's going to be like $30-40. By buying something that's not cheap, you can ensure that you're not going to be picking up all the room noise. It's funny, but smartphones and things like that do cause a lot of interference. And if you have it close to the cable, it will pick up that noise when you get a message or something like that. So a shielded cable of good quality is recommended. 10 feet long is a pretty good length. It's not too long, not too short. You can move things around that way. Because I have the microphone here and the camera is 7 feet away from me, I'm going with a cable that's around 10 feet long, and that allows me to place the next item we need closer to the camera, and that is a microphone preamp. So the preamp in this case, I have several. I'm using, in this case, an M-Audio M-Track II. It cost me like $100 when I bought it at the time. But really, you want to target around $100 to $200 for a preamp. You don't need a preamp that has USB, as long as your camera has a line input. So it has a line input port. You can hook the preamp directly to your camera, and your camera will bring the signal into your computer. In that case, you have a few different choices. You can do something like a DBX 286. That's like a single channel mic preamp with a compressor, a noise filter, a lot of these other fun features. That is a great choice, for example, for something like the Shure SM7B, if you want to have a lot of fun toys to play with. If you want compression, for example. Or you can go with just your standard USB preamp and put it into standby mode, which means you don't have it connected to the computer necessarily. You have it just connected to a USB power charger, and you use the line out from the preamp to feed into the camera. So this is important. If you buy a preamp, you need to make sure it has essentially a consumer line out option, consumer line level output. And if you have that, you can then hook the preamp up to the line in of the Panasonic GH5S. Not all cameras have a line input. Most of them don't have any sort of input for an external camera, and a few might only have a mic input port. There's a big difference between mic in and line in. You might need to attenuate a line level to get it down to a mic level. So if you have that problem, you might need to buy an attenuation cable. It will lower the decibels usually of the line out to meet the mic level of your particular camera. Those might be like $40. Or you can just buy a camera that has line level, and that's what I would recommend. So that's what I did in this case. I got a Panasonic GH5, which had line in, and then I could feed the line out from the preamp into the camera. You could buy a preamp or a microphone that has USB out and feed it directly into the computer over USB. But the challenge is your camera is going to probably have a delay on it. The capture card you're using is probably going to have a delay on it. And so you're going to be out of sync between the audio and the video. If you're recording into OBS, you can use the virtual cam or whatever to kind of be a middleman, and you can delay the audio in OBS and then use the virtual camera of OBS to synchronize the video and audio. That's an option. It's kind of annoying. If you want a more streamlined solution though, again, you just plug the microphone directly into the camera, and so the signal comes out of the camera with the video and audio already synced perfectly. And that allows you to work with any application without having to do any additional synchronization. And that's my personal preference. I want the setup to be as easy as possible. Okay, what else do we have here? Getting the camera signal in from the camera to the computer, you have lots of options. The Panasonic GH5S does have a USB out. It does have a virtual, it does have a webcam driver essentially where you can connect the camera to your computer to act as a webcam. And Panasonic provides that as a driver. So technically you could just plug and play and get going. I personally bought a Camlink. So this is a raw kind of input to my computer without any sort of video compression. It's pretty low latency, and it's USB 3.0 in. There are some better options out there that are lower latency that I would recommend. They're just out of my price range. They're $300-400 for something that I would really recommend for top-notch performance. But even something that's cheap, that's like one of those $15 HDMI to USB dongles will be adequate. The Camlink lets me do 60 frames a second at 1080p. And so I'm kind of a fan of that. And so I personally find a Camlink, whether it's the 4K or the older non-4K version, to be a good choice. Good enough latency, and you get some very good video quality. Now, because we're going with the Panasonic GH5S, which is low light, and we have a very fast or very bright lens on this camera, we don't need much lighting. Like, I'm actually shooting in kind of like ambient light here. There really isn't a whole lot of light going on. I have some LED lights behind me that are almost out of batteries, and yet they still shine pretty bright behind me, right? And that just shows that this is not a very bright setup. I do have professional lighting in this room. So I have a wireless remote control here where I can turn lights on without getting out of my seat. And so this is very important because bright lights are kind of annoying. They're bright. They blind me, right? And I don't want to use them longer than I have to. So if I'm going into a meeting, I can just toggle the lights on if I need the lights. I don't actually need the lights with the setup though, and I don't have them set up correctly. But these are large square lights that are LED based, so they don't heat up the room. I don't need them. So I actually turn them off and I use the ambient light of the room, and I find that gives it a more intimate, warm feeling. I do still have lighting. So one thing is I have lighting above me, and these are hair lights essentially. When I built this little home studio, I put kind of railing lights up so I can move the lights around the ceiling wherever I want, and I can position them to point in different places. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to change the lighting in this room depending on where I have the desk or what I'm doing. And I just have a couple lights behind me pointing down at my head. So they're just pointing down at the back of my head, and those are hair lights. They give me a little bit of contrast to the background, which I think is nice and sharp looking. I then also have a couple lights in front of me, and these lights, you know what they are? They're just this light here, the main one. It is just a 55-inch LCD TV. Yeah, that's all it is. So I have a 50-inch LCD TV pretty much behind the camera. And so when I'm in a conference call, I can kind of put the conference call and my meeting notes kind of behind the camera. And that allows me to see who I'm talking to and look directly at the camera or very close to the camera. So it looks like I'm looking at the camera, and it allows me to position the lighting wherever I want. I just create a white window. I can open up Notepad and I can just position that window, resize it to however I kind of want on the TV. And I can put meeting notes on that Notepad, and which is what I'm doing here. So I have my notes on the TV, and that same Notepad application that has text is also illuminating my face. And the important parts here were that, I had to color calibrate the TV. And so I color calibrated the TV so that the white balance was around 6,500 Kelvin, which is your standard kind of warmth, your standard white balance for video. I also have, the backgrounds of my room painted gray, a very neutral gray. And so the camera tends to lock on to that very neutral white balance. And so I don't have to do much in the way of color correction with the camera. Everything's on automatic. And it's pretty much automatic there. I don't have to do any sort of white balancing or even exposure. I have the camera in face detection mode, and so it automatically adjusts the exposure based on my face. Who would have thought that just an LCD TV would do it? The only trick is you need to ensure the frame rate of your TV is in sync with your camera. Otherwise, you might get some rolling effect. But yeah, they're in sync in this case, 60 and 120 hertz. So everything is being aligned. No problem there. Everyone has a spare monitor. You can use a spare monitor as a very large light source. You just need to make sure that it's not overly bright, and you need to make sure that the white balance of the monitor is correctly calibrated to both the lights in the room, the lights of your camera. So all the light sources need to be the same sort of warmth. As you see behind me, those LEDs behind me are very warm, and as a result, they give off a yellow hue. So that's an idea of what you don't want as any sort of main lights. Otherwise, you end up getting these weird hues on your face, either blue or yellow or even purple. So that's something to keep in mind, is lighting and making sure they're color calibrated. So all the lights are the same and that they're balanced. Looking at my notes, I have an audio cable going from the preamp into the camera. In this case, it's an RCA to 3.5 millimeter adapter. You might want to convert from stereo to mono with an adapter there, so the camera outputs a mono signal rather than stereo. But that's normally not a problem with most applications these days. They mostly convert stereo to mono anyways. You might see behind me I have some sound absorbing panels. Behind me, this is just cheap foam, and it's actually all kind of just for show. I do have real sound absorbing panels in this room. They're just not as pretty. I have them on the ceiling, and I have them behind in areas around the room. So around the room, I do have some pretty large sound absorbing panels, and the foam behind me here is really just for show. If you can get like a couch or carpets in the room, that also helps. But the point of this is to dampen echoes in the room. You don't want strong echoes. Even if you get the microphone close to your face, you're still going to get room echoes. So you want to really keep the room kind of quiet. You may not be able to prevent noise that's going on in your house or your condo, but at the very least you can get rid of the echo in the room. Last but not least, when I'm actually having a conversation with people, I wear headphones. I don't use the speakers in the room because then I have to use echo cancellation. And if I can wear headphones, I won't be using echo cancellation, and that just improves the quality of the audio pretty substantially, in my opinion. And if you can turn off the echo cancellation in the meeting software you're on, even better. You generally want to disable noise cancellation, echo cancellation if you can. Do as much as you can yourself without needing digital effects, and that will give you the highest quality results there. I can give other additional recommendations, like having a limiter or some sort of gain setting within your preamp, so that you're not relying on auto gain or third-party set-off software to manage gain levels for you. Yeah, I guess that's it. So that's my setup. It's pretty comprehensive. So we're talking about from audio to lighting to the type of cables even. There's a lot that goes into this, and a setup to emulate what I have here will probably cost a few $1,000s. Although you could probably get by with maybe $1,000 if you buy budget items at every step. I guess you get what you pay for, though, right? If you want this setup, you're going to have to pay a few $1,000s to do this. Anyways, that's my setup, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm going to stop recording. Bye.